Why We Bleep is sponsored by Signal Sounds. When I purchase things on the internet, I have a few very specific criteria. 1. Are the goods readily available and shipped worldwide? 2. Are the people who sell said goods nice and cuddly? And 3. Do they sell boring old normal stuff that I've heard of? Or do they also sell weird things from exotic companies like GOLDFRAPP, which I've never heard of? These are the reasons why Signal Sounds suit me to the ground. They sell incredibly weird things like the Polyend Tracker, which is like a calculator spreadsheet that makes jungle. They've got a thing called a Fractals Renso, which is an analog FM through zero super oscillator, but looks like a close-up of a spider's face. And finally, they sell this tiny thin little DivKid rund step module. A high-quality 6-output random voltage module engineered for minimal pitch drop and maximum modulation in a compact 4HP form factor. Heard of that one? So to purchase things you've heard of, and purchase things you haven't, go to the website of signalsounds.com. That website is signalsounds.com. Why? Hi. Merry heck. Wow. The world is changing. The world is changing. The world has always been changing, but I hope that the last month and a bit has proved that the world is changing for the better. It feels like things could really genuinely change, but it won't happen without pressure. It needs pressure for things to change because it's far too cozy for people who are in charge. I hope that the social force online and in the streets can really, really drive the wedge to change some of these structures that have been set in place. Certainly in terms of improving the way that police seem to treat the citizens of America, but globally, that we realise how this system has been gamed and that we make it fairer. It's funny, last month someone commented on the podcast and said, don't politicise things, stick to synths. And while my response to that person was to block them whilst also saying, go start your own podcast then, I feel it's very important to point out that this is not politicising electronic music in any way, shape or form, because anyone who knows anything should know that despite the fact that I said last month that sure, Kraftwerk pioneered the concept of electro, it is not white people who made electro what it really is. It's black people. Electro, techno, house music, dance music has been overwhelmingly pioneered by black musicians, and many of them in America. Their music is the concrete foundation upon which this entire industry, in all of its forms, of the clubs, of the companies, of the synthesizers, of the modules, of the software, we owe literally everything to black musicians. So to pretend like it's not relevant to this podcast would be absurd. And I'm not going to do that. So I hope we all have the energy, and especially we, referring to white people, to keep sticking up and putting effort into dismantling the systems that are making this an unfair world if you're not white. There is an excellent sort of disambiguation page if you're looking for ways to help. It is linked below and linked in the descriptions of this podcast, but it's blacklivesmatters.card.co. blacklivesmatters.card.co. I've been donating money throughout the month variously to various different organisations and with various drives, one of which I really want to shout out here, but it's especially relevant to the synthy world, and that is AfroRack. AfroRack. That is a wonderful group of people in Chicago who put on workshops and tutorials to help young black people in Chicago learn modular synthesis. Couldn't be more up our Strasse here. Especially if you listen back to the episode with Liz Dobson where we talked about education. I am incredibly privileged as a person, and therefore I have been able to have the time, the luxury, and been given the money to be able to buy some music equipment that started me off. Not everyone gets this luxury or is in a position or has people of influence. What AfroRack are doing is providing that, especially for people who just wouldn't necessarily have another outlet. It's allowing modular synthesis to be something that kids can discover, as well as music production in general. I think of Mike Huckabee from Chicago as well, who's a wonderful educator, sadly passed away very recently. It just highlights, some of the people that Mike Huckabee fostered and worked with come on to have careers and toured the world. People need access to this stuff. So please consider donating some cash to AfroRack. They are afrorack.org. That is afrorack.org. I have donated. Please, if you can, consider donating. Today, I'm extremely pleased to present a chat with someone I have been trying to have a chat with for quite some time. We've embraced the distance of the internet, and I've used a funky system to be able to chat to Hazel Mills. Hazel is a Bristol-based pianist, vocalist, and songwriter who you may well have seen on stage playing with Florence and the Machine, with GOLDFRAPP, Birdie, and something we particularly talk about in the podcast, the Will Gregory Moog Ensemble, which is just a truly wonderful, wonderful thing where many musicians on stage play synthesizers like kind of Wendy Carlos's sort of gorgeous orchestral synthesizer music. It is indescribably exquisite. And Hazel is one of the ensemble, and she is an astonishingly talented musician and player. Hazel has been making music for many, many, many years, but before that would play the piano. Initially starting out with just playing with her uncle just for fun. We talk about how she just realised she had this kind of drive, this need to create songs. And we talk about this and many, many other things. It's a really nice, long, kind of meandering chat. We talk about playing with the Moog Ensemble. I'm going to put a link in the description to this piece called Oceans of Heaven by Eddie Parker, which we talk about. And that is... like all of the synthesizers are playing a kind of swell. So all at once, swelling a massive chord into existence. And interestingly, as Hazel talks about, just using the filter. They don't use the volume knobs, they use the filter. So everything kind of swells in that kind of low-pass gate sense that they become duller and brighter. And it's like, it's proper like hairs on the back of your neck stuff. And we talk about her studio and synths, like Desert Island synths, favourite kit. We even get into talking a bit about film and Hitchcock, because Hazel, if you follow Hazel on Twitter, you can kind of, there's a real interest in film and sort of that side, which obviously is innately tied with music. And 60s experimental music, minimalism, Steve Reich, Morton Feldman, and many other things. It is, as I say, an interesting, flowing chat. But before we speak to Hazel, we have one more sponsored message. Why We Bleep is also sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is a truly wonderful thing. It's an online learning platform. It hosts online video classes and in just a wonderfully mind-boggling array of choices. So anything that you're particularly interested in learning and absorbing yourself in, there is almost certainly a class in that subject, including film and video, good stuff to do with color grading, using lenses and lighting to convey emotion, music production, fine art, animation, creative writing. I've been trying to design some Milo Melodies merchandising. So I actually did get into the design great stuff, how to make merch with Draplin. This is Aaron Draplin of the Draplin Design Company, teaching literally the whole process on how to make merchandising, from like selecting vendors to how to sort of modify design so that they'll work better on a pin badge versus a sewing patch. It's really well done. Like, he's very funny. It's very like entertaining. Not only did it actually teach me some of the like tenets basically to bear in mind, but also just genuinely inspiring. Like, hearing from someone whose passion, you know, whose entire career has been this, is made me think more about, you know, I should do more with it. It's not just making some crap to put on Teespring or something just to sell some shirts, or I should do more with it and be passionate about it. Like, it genuinely inspired me to do a better job. So yes, I am a big believer in this. I think it's good. It's a force for good in the world. So if you're interested in learning some new skills, please do check that out. Plus, it's also less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. But I've got a juicy deal for you. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description to this video/podcast will get a 2-month free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Go nab yourself a free 2 months and learn some stuff. Learn yourself some new skills. There's even one on how to make a podcast. Might take that one. So thank you, Skillshare. And on that subject, let's speak to Hazel Mills. Thanks.
My initial background was like classical, really. I'd learned the piano from the age of 6 and played pianos. And I grew up with a piano, and I kind of miss that action because I still don't own, as a grown-up, I still don't own a real piano. I have access to one.
What sort of piano did you have in the place, in your folks' house?
I've got absolutely no idea. It was an upright. I swear it was white at one point, and then it was brown, so they'd painted it.
Well, there's been like a really big accident or something. But
I don't know.
My folks have got an upright, and it's I really like them. And I mean, when I was a little kid, I used to there's a little catch on the upright that holds in the sort of front panel, and basically when you twang it, it makes the most amazing bow sort of sound.
Amazing. No, that's good, because it's all about getting inside the piano, really, getting the front off.
But the only problem is that because uprights are upright, you can't lay things over the keys. Or have you found ways to, over the strings, like prepare them?
No, that's why ideally one day I'd like to have like more than one piano, one that I can just leave alone and sounds amazing, and one that I can abuse and do things to. But yeah, ideally, obviously a grand piano you can lay things on. But no, I remember I watched a video, I think it was Cuckoo, he did a where he would just put gaffer tape on the strings with an upright piano, and it would create a kind of clunky sound, which is great.
So it wouldn't be like the felt muted, it was like a bonk.
No, it was like it was quite a clunky sound. It was great.
That is quite weird. The prepared piano thing is just such a beautiful, interesting concept that it's my gran had like a baby grand. I think I do remember. I remember like resting my nails against the strings and kind of doing some of that. But I also remember with my parents' upright, it's just the sound it makes when you really slam hard on the sustain. I don't even know the name of it. The right hand pedal.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes like the whole thing just goes, and you hear all the strings sort of vibrate at once.
Yeah. I was just going to say one more thing. I was actually thinking about this earlier today, about the kind of the reverb and the resonance that you get naturally from just having the pedal down. the sustain pedal down in a piano. And sometimes I like to get my head inside and listen. And I wondered about like I bet someone's done this, reamping something like the recording of a vocal or something, and playing it through a speaker inside the piano with the pedal down. I shouldn't say this out loud.
You're giving away all your good stuff. Yeah, you should just.
It's probably been done before, but yeah, that's what I want to do. That's what I'll do when I get my piano.
That's a great idea. What if you had the like an EBow or something? Could you have an EBow that you instead of it just being a straight vibration? Because do EBows vibrate at a very specific frequency? Presumably they do. But could you get an EBow that you could almost play like voltage into, and it would oscillate the strings at different rates depending? That could exist, surely.
Yeah, because I don't really fully understand how an EBow works. Is that what it is? It's a specific frequency?
I think so. Basically, my understanding is it's like some kind of electromagnet, and it's turning itself on and off really fast, and so that when you put it near a guitar string that's metal, then it's literally making the guitar string vibrate as if you twanged it with your finger, but without the twang, and so you get like a soft attack and an infinite sustain, obviously, but it must be oscillating at a particular frequency. But then isn't that a function of the string width?
I don't know either. I think the frequency is also definitely related to the string. But yeah, I've tried EBow on a piano before, and it is fun.
Does it work?
Yeah, it does. It was a while ago, to be honest, and I didn't really use it for anything serious. So.
It's an experiment.
Just playing, yeah.
So how are you doing with this whole like COVID thing? I mean, I've been reading lots of stuff. Follow lots of people and, professional independent musicians. And I do feel that it must just be surely the hardest of times. Like this is presumably something that the industry is not in any way prepared for. And it's like, no one really considered that. What am I trying to? You get this thing where basically people who like run pubs say, "Oh, pubs are sort of recession proof and any proof," but they're not. But like this, it just illustrates how the entire entertainment industry is not protected against something like this.
No.
So how, for you, how has this affected you, and what do you think the repercussions are going to be?
Well, the most immediate way that it affected me when this all first broke out was that I lost all my touring work for the next 5 months. So yeah, obviously that's not so good. But also in terms of, I can't really do my thing at home. In like I've got most of my gear lives in a studio somewhere on the other side of Bristol.
Yeah.
And so I managed to get a few small bits back home. But so obviously I'm limited in that sense, which, could be a good thing, and that's fine. But I also can't really make much noise here because, I'm a considerate neighbour.
Yes.
So in terms of vocal stuff, that I feel, I haven't really sang properly in such a long time.
Do you think you can get a good recording at home as well, or do you think you've got to be in a studio for that?
No, I can. I've got a couple of decent mics here that I can use. The rooms aren't the best sounding, but I've sort of been writing a few things that are softer vocals, so I can kind of get away with just being really close to the mic, not singing too loudly, and also not getting too much of the room. And I probably could get some decent stuff out of that, but it's not really inspiring me at the moment, that situation.
Do you think for you is the studio it's not just about the noise and the space? Is it about a certain headspace as well can you work effectively at home? Do you know what I mean? With all the distractions.
Well, the thing is, I actually love working at home. It's all the kind of the in the box stuff I love to do at home. So I'm quite lucky in that I've got a load of stuff that I worked on before this whole pandemic that I can work on in the box because there's a load of stuff already recorded. So that's all fine. I've got things I can get on with and, writing quietly. But there are some things that I just really miss I just miss making noise, you know. But in terms of the mindset, it's just got to be somewhere that I feel there's some familiarity. And so that could either be home or it could be the studio.
Are you playing acoustic instruments in the studio as well? What do you play as well as just, do you play exclusively keyboard or?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I've got a few sort of little toys, percussive toys. But yeah, I think basically piano, keys and voice are my main instruments.
Obviously, you were practicing to play GOLDFRAPP tours. Is that right?
Yeah, we were kind of halfway through the planned rehearsal process, in that we did a kind of week or so sort of locally in Wiltshire. And then we were going to do, after that, we were going to do however long in London with a string quartet. And so we kind of got through that first week together, had an amazing time. It was so much fun. But all the while knowing that this was all kind of creeping up on us, and we're kind of thinking, okay, what's going to happen? And so we were all together when it was decided, you know, what was going to have to happen. So yeah, it was an odd time because we all felt very together. You know, that we'd kind of hyped up the whole thing together and been working together, getting really excited about it, and then okay, we have to wait a year. It's fine.
So what is the rehearsal process like? You know, for that band, how do you do that?
I mean, I can only speak for a couple of tours worth, but I think, I mean, it's probably similar to most bands in that there's, well, particularly when there's a lot of electronic stuff going on, there's a kind of pre-production process. Certainly with what I'm doing and the other keyboard player, Angie, we kind of worked together quite a lot because with this tour, which was going to be the Felt Mountain anniversary.
Yeah.
And they haven't played a lot of those songs since it came out 20 years ago. So in the way that the live setup exists now, those songs just don't exist. They haven't been programmed. So we basically kind of figured it all out together from scratch.
Presumably, like tunes like that, if it's 20 years ago, those are probably on like S1000s or something, or are they?
I just can't remember what sampler they used, but yeah, It was all on a sampler and had to be kind of transferred to virtual world.
Reorchestrated, basically.
Yeah. And so we're using instruments that we built kind of using EXS24, and it's running off main stage. Kind of using the original, either the original samples from the record or kind of sampling the actual synths that we used.
Do you have a sort of rule to like keep it faithful, or is there a sort of sense that you're allowed to kind of modernize something? Not that it.
I think it's different with every band I work with, really. Sometimes I do have the opportunity to kind of recreate it on something else or do something similar. With that project, it's quite true to the record. So I haven't really, I'd love to get some analog synths involved and do it all live. That would be great. But it's sort of quite tricky I found this for maybe like the last 3 big tours that I've done, that you have to really think about how to make it work on tour and be reliable and replicable. And so I feel like my kind of analog synth world that's what I do in my writing and probably will do live with my own project, but it's a completely different world to a kind of big on the road tour, because you know there are so many different sounds within one set that I need to use, and it's just not practical to bring loads of synths that could end up dying on you. And so there are some compromises in that sense, that, you know, a lot of it is coming off a laptop. But actually I really try and make it as live as possible in the way that I'm kind of delivering it, in terms of like the interface. You know, it needs to be something with faders and pads. And when I was touring with Birdie a few years back, I actually used a ribbon controller, MIDI controller, that was controlling main stage. But obviously that's a really kind of visual, tactile thing.
Mm.
So yeah, there's a bit of a kind of some figuring out involved in setting up these rigs, not just in the audio part of it and getting the sounds right, but also figuring out how I'm going to perform them in a way that is a performance.
Yeah. What does that? I mean, that I've been thinking a lot. I think a lot about that in terms of what, I think to myself, if I'm sort of watching a show, what do I consider live, and what is, it's that question of what is important. What is important when you actually go and see a band? Is it sort of communing with the people who actually made the record and just being in the same room as them and enjoying music, where it's not as important that it is been the technical difficulty? If you make an equivalent of like abstract painting, it's not about the technical skill required to put the mark. It's about the idea of what mark went down. And I think the same thing can probably be said of live music.
Yeah.
I suppose, but for the question for you, especially as a person who's, you have a sort of classical background in that sense that you have the physical chops to play these things live. What for you, what is live, and when you say that you're kind of, you're trying to strike a balance, like what is the perfect balance? What do you want to see if you go see a show?
Yeah, I think you're right, because I that element of risk, I think, is maybe underrated, because that, knowing that something could fall apart at any moment, but that's part of the magic. I really like that, and I miss that a little bit. But yeah, I think just somebody that I spoke to recently about this very same question, what is live, especially in relation to electronic music and using laptops in particular, is he used the phrase moving air. And so it's not just like, I really don't want to see people just constantly looking at a laptop screen and, making their adjustments based on that, because to me that you can use a laptop live and it not necessarily be part of the performance, or not even be visible, or the audience might not know it's there, kind of thing. So I think it's about what the performer is doing. It's not necessarily the tools that they're using. Well, it can be if it's like for me, the visual side of it is really important, I think.
Do you mean seeing what they're doing, or that there is a sort of like lights and projection and kind of
I think the physical side of moving something or touching, the touch and manipulating something by physically moving it. Have you heard of a guy called Pierre Bastien?
No.
He's this French composer who I saw. I didn't know who he was when I went to see him, but he came to play at a Bath music festival, and he builds mechanical musical instruments out of Meccano mostly, and other bits and bobs, and like motors and fans and elastic bands and pipes, and so they basically, in a sense, they play themselves. You've got loads of kind of cogs moving around that might either pluck a string every time it goes around, or it might move a set of pipes over a fan or something that's blowing air, and so it's playing notes. And so, but the thing is, it's not just like this machine playing music. It's the way that he manipulates it. So he's constantly like adding a different elastic band on to change the note, or like changing the pipes to change the notes, or changing the cogs to, and some cogs might have a specific rhythm built into them, and he's doing that as he goes along. And to me, like that was one of the most, I don't know why, but it was one of the most moving musical performances I've ever seen. And it doesn't, like, the way that I'm describing it might not do it justice, but I think it might be because it's like this manipulation of this kind of physical manipulation. And also maybe because the machines are kind of, they're not computers. And he's made a point of saying that he did all this before computers in live music were even, the idea of that was even invented. And so there's a kind of slightly clunkiness to the way that they move. It's not completely perfect because it's kind of man-made thing. And I quite like that. The idea that something has a kind of human quality to it, even if it's not, like a synth that isn't perfect, like analog synths that are like my Juno 106 that's had a dying voice chip for the last year or so, and I can't get to her to get her fixed. No. But actually she's sort of making these wonderful sounds as a result of that, because it's not completely perfect,
Does she still, is the voice still sounding in a way, or is it just quiet?
It does. So it's either sounding or it's squealing, like it's the resonance on the filter suddenly going insane.
That's amazing. That's much more fun than just silence for a note.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it's made its way onto that very sound, onto a record, and it's probably soon to make its way onto another one, I think.
Nice.
Unintentionally, but yeah, sorry.
So I was just going to say, I've just been looking at Pierre Bastien. And those machines, it's kind of what you were saying. So it makes me think of that whole. It's that there's something about seeing the sort of the process in action. I know that you're a fan of like Steve Reich and sort of 60s minimalism and kind of those composers, and it's certainly Reich. He's a person where the music is structured in a way so that the audience can understand how it was composed. So he's sort of just in the same way as if I was to start a tune, I'll start with one particular sound and add something, and I could play back the tune in the same sort of order. Then Reich has kind of done that too, and so you get this sense of seeing how it was constructed. I think in the case of like those machines, it's like that times 11, and you've got that sort of also that concept of there's something sort of beautiful about something that is a kind of unnecessary, and there's obviously clearly a lot of work and a labor of love to create, and has like one specific purpose, and a purpose that is just purely art. It's very sort of just a good reminder of why humans can be nice and good sometimes.
Yeah, it's true. Although having said that, I just remembered an interview that maybe I shouldn't ruin the moment by saying this.
That's fine.
No, I will. I will do it.
Go on, do it.
In an interview that he was talking about, Pierre Bastien, he was talking about how one of the reasons he initially started making these machines was that he wouldn't have, collaborating with other people was like, had problems in that he didn't know what to do when there were kind of contradictions and conflict going on. And a machine will just do what he builds them to do.
Oh, that's quite sad.
I know.
Poor Pierre. He's just not had a good studio experience.
Yeah, maybe not.
Oh,
but
sad.
The idea that something kind of unfurls in front of you, like you mentioned Steve Reich, and you kind of know how it's been put together, that sort of made me think of that. Well, I guess maybe the first piece I ever heard by him that kind of changed my life a little bit was Piano Phase. I don't know if you've heard that. And you sort of know what's happening when you're listening to it.
Yeah.
And yet there are still surprises coming along constantly throughout the whole thing, which is great.
Absolutely, like clapping music as well, where it's such a simple conceit, and also it's very, very clear that there's just two people clapping, but I definitely would say and 100% agree, like certainly in clapping music as well, it's just phase effects that are every time it rolls, however many it is, 8 bars, and then it moves on to the next phase. It's suddenly, it's always a surprise, even though you understand what is happening, it's an incredible process.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a shame that Steve never really? I mean, he's very down on electronic music as a concept because Wright always says that acoustic instruments are just more interesting sounding, and I'm sure he's right. There is, when people have tried to do like digital version or digital like analog versions with synths of like music for 18 musicians, they never. Part of the like glory of music for 18 musicians is the fact that it is humans playing it, and like Pierre Bastien's machines, it's you're seeing something kind of. It's that you're seeing it really happen in front of you. It's not a recording, and it's like Bastien requires machines. It's the fact that music for 18 musicians is like the inverse. It's like machine music, but it's actually played by humans in a way that you think human probably. It would never occur to you that humans can play like that if they practice. I don't. Have you ever tried to? Have you played any of his pieces or music? Tried to.
What, Steve Wright?
Yeah.
Not Pierre Bastien.
Yeah, not built anything yet.
Because basically at the time that I discovered him, that sort of opened the world of live looping up to me, and I went through a bit of a phase of live looping. So I did try playing piano phase with myself, not with either hand. I know that somebody's done that. That's insane skill involved in that. Like, because you know the premise of it, where there's the one, or for anyone who's listening, there's like a piano phrase that's like 12 notes long, and repeated, and it's played by two people on a piano each in unison, and one person throughout the entire thing stays at the same tempo, and the other person speeds up every now and again in order to really gradually get out of sync and then lock back in rhythmically, but obviously then being rhythmically displaced in terms of the melodic phrase.
Yeah.
I would record the phrase onto a looper and then have a go at being the moving tempo against it. And it's quite therapeutic, actually. I'd recommend it
meditative?
If you get a chance. Yeah. Yeah.
I tried to play clapping.
That's the only thing, though. Oh yeah, clapping music. I've had a little go at.
Have you? How did you do?
I can't remember. I think it was at school, actually. But there's also an app. Have you seen the app for clapping music? I have seen the app
for train you to learn to clap.
Yeah, I'd quite like to do it again. Sorry, not the app, but I'd quite like to just play it again.
Might be good for your neighbours as well, especially if they're terrible music.
Yeah, that's
Hazel,
a good idea.
Just like,
like, what on earth?
What's she doing? And endless as well. I have tried to play clapping music, and it's really, really hard. It's like the concept, the rhythm, the core rhythm is so incredibly simple, but it's worth trying. If anyone's listening to this, is like go and get the score for it. It's very simple, and it is literally just two people clapping that rhythm I clapped before, and then I think it is every 8 bars. One of the clappers stays exactly the same, and the other shifts like one sort of beat ahead, I think it is, or behind. And what happens is you get all these different rhythms, but what's interesting is it's not physically. I don't think anyone on earth could just perform clapping music the first time. And every transition into each of the stages requires that even though you know the actual, like the core rhythm, you're actually learning a new rhythm, if that makes sense. You almost have to play the hybrid rhythm that it creates.
I think that's the only way to do it without getting completely confused, is to learn each rhythm as a separate rhythm.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm remembering back to it now. Just looking at the score.
That is what is amazing about it as well, because you think it would be like, oh, how hard can it be? But it's weird, and I don't know what it says. It's probably a lot about the way that brains work and the ears work, and that we're not logical beings in any way whatsoever. So
No.
yeah,
I
it's
think that's
interesting.
what I like, because you said it's so simple. But I think the fact that it is such a simple concept, but when you listen to it as a piece of music, it doesn't sound like it. I think that's what. That's the whole premise of minimalism, isn't it? So I think that's why I like it.
I never listened to Morton Feldman, who's someone that you recommend.
Yeah.
Could you give me a sort of brief, like what does his music mean to you?
Well, I'm a bit confused by him sometimes. But if I can't concentrate on one era, then I'm less confused, because he changed his mind a lot. But for me, well, I kind of looked a lot at his piano music. He wrote a lot of piano music that was it's basically really sparse. Like, you'd hear one note or chord and it would ring out, and nothing else would happen until that note decays, and a bit of silence, and then another note would come in. And it's the idea of allowing the sound to play itself, to just be uninterrupted, unaffected by humanity. And he even went so far as to say, try and not play with any attack, which obviously is not really that possible with a piano. And later on, I think he kind of experimented with electronic music for that reason, because you could obviously take attack off, but he wanted to keep it completely just like the attack. I think he saw the attack as a kind of, that's the sound of human impact kind of thing. So he wanted the sounds to sing for themselves. So a lot of his piano pieces are ever so slightly dissonant or atonal, however you want to think of it, because like each chord would be something like they'd be really far apart as well. He had enormous hands, by the way.
Did he?
So like so if you don't have big hands, it's quite hard to play his piano pieces, because there would be a 2-note chord like really far apart, like more than a tenth apart. So you'd have to really stretch your hands. I got quite big hands, I guess. But yeah, so it's this kind of celebration of the decaying of the note and this very static kind of feel, I guess. Nice. That's the part of him the part of his music that sort of spoke to me.
That sounds great. It's like the what's it? Well, it's that kind of sympathetic resonance thing. It's the listening. Actually, that reminds me of the. Have you seen the band Suno play ever?
I've not seen them. No.
Do you know if you're familiar with? Well, and for the benefit of anyone listening, basically, this is a sort of doom core. I probably don't know what their music is technically, but sort of like ambient doom music, but played on guitars, and they have a couple of synths. But their music is, like, by the sounds of it, as reductive as Feldman's music, in the sense that, you know, when I saw them play, there were like 3 or 4 of them dressed as sort of like monks. The stage had so much dry ice on it that the entire contents of the stage would be invisible. You know, it was just you were staring into a cloud, basically. And that they would sort of stand there with the guitars and then slam the guitars with their, you know, strum them, but in an open tuning. You know, there's no left hand, you know, on the neck. And the guitars all ring at the same time in a sort of crazy discordant way. And then as you keep listening to this massive singular sound, they decay. And then it sounds like they all sort of synchronize in the way that when you see, have you seen those like clips of cat's cradles, or what are they called? You know, those like sort of executive desk toys.
Yeah.
There are like, you can do these things where you put them on a jig or something and play and click them, and eventually they'll all synchronize.
They all go in sync, yeah.
Yeah, and it felt like that was happening with guitar strings with that band, and I don't think I wish that I was as reductive in my own music, and like actually, I suppose personally, I'm just like, maybe I can be. And I mean, you must be the same for yourself, that if you're messing with synths, there is a part of messing with a synth where you're basically just holding a chord down, hold is on, or your hand is just stuck on those notes, and it's just listening to the sound of all of those notes interact.
Yeah.
That must be common to everyone, surely.
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of a good way of practicing like patience, mindfulness, if you like, because like you might want to just keep playing and playing notes, but sometimes you need to let something do its own thing. Like I don't own a modular system, but I've had a good old go with one quite a bit, and I've kind of learned that with modular synths, I'm maybe with the patches that I've set up, is that I just need to calm down, chill out, and sit back a bit and just let it, because if I keep changing it, I'm going to keep changing what's modulating, and I'm not going to allow the modulating to unfurl it by itself, kind of thing. So yeah, I think maybe that's a similar thing. And you know what I mentioned earlier about kind of sticking my head inside a piano and listening to the note. Part of what I love about that is that you can physically hear the sound bouncing around, and it's like it's pulsing somehow when you're that close to it. And it's like, it's obviously the sound wave physically moving. And there's something about that physicality that I'm actually really missing at the moment.
It's also just that it reminds you that a piano is a 3D instrument, and pianos are meant to be played in rooms, and that there is a physical interaction with the air in the room, and that's the nature of sound, that it bounces around and it focuses itself into corners of rooms. And that's something that is lost in headphones and synthesizers, is that sort of the just insane richness of the acoustic world. That's something that's that's when people talk about studios are dead, and it's like I don't know, there's a lot to be said for it. Certainly, I mean, I just personally, I will always enjoy going into a big echoey space, like going into like a massive industrial unit that's empty, and so there's a kind of 10-second reverb tail in it or something. Those are always sort of electrifying experiences, because you can't help but shout or whoop and make a sound and just listen to the kind of infinity. I suppose that's the nature of playing with reverbs. And
yeah, I mean, I do agree with you, but at the same time, I don't want to downplay synths, because they sort of have their own magic, even though it's a different kind of space. They still occupy a space in a way.
An acoustic world, you mean? Sort of
acoustically, yeah. Who was I reading about the other day that was talking about this? It's a combination. I was actually looking up the Oscar Sala, who played the Trautonium.
Yes,
and
because of the subharmonicon.
Exactly, yeah. I'm quite intrigued by that, but I don't know. Yeah, I saw your video on it.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that. So
no, it's fine. It is really interesting. The subharmonicon, certainly, and also the concepts. I think it's cool that Moog, it is quite crackers. The design of the subharmonicon, and it's interesting to look to the past, where you'll find these versions of synthesizers that were before we had a template. Before we had a mini Moog, which became the sort of like everyone's accepted definition of what a synthesizer was. There is, of course, like a whole, there are an infinite amount of approaches that haven't really been explored. There's perhaps a danger that we're we're going to get trapped by the past if we're just going in sort of, if all we ever crave is a version of something we've already had. So I do commend them for finding the weirder things. You know what I mean? Of like the Troutonium. Was it It was the Troutonium, wasn't it? It was sort of divided.
Yeah, it was because I was watching this little documentary. There was a bit of footage of Oscar Sala playing it, and it just you wouldn't have looked at it and thought, oh yeah, electronic instrument. There's this misconception of electronic music or synths being kind of sterile and not expressive maybe. And that was like that completely defied that misconception. It's worth looking. Oh, I wonder if I can. Maybe I'll send you the link if I can find it again. But have a look.
Definitely.
Yeah. Then it's just the way that he plays it, and it's so he's so expressive with it. There's no comparison between. In fact, it was there's an article in Sound on Sound out at the moment. That's an interview with Vangelis.
Yeah.
I don't know how you say it.
I think it's Vangelis, isn't it?
Well, I always say Vangelis, but now I'm
You've got it right.
doubting it. Okay.
You're the Moog of the Vangelis world.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was sort of basically saying that he doesn't see any difference between acoustic instruments and electronic instruments. It's all the problem is if you have an instrument that you think isn't going to be very expressive, the problem lies within the person that made, not the person, but the design of the instrument. So obviously the CS80 having sort of velocity sensitive and having the ribbon controller thing, there's a lot of expression in that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the side of synthesis that I'm quite excited by, is when it's maybe not human. It's got character, but it's not human. It's not trying to be something else. It's it's got its own life to it.
Do you think it's more important that it comes from a human's fingers, or is it equally valid that it's modulation that you've programmed or have engineered? That it's playing itself, or is it more important that you play it?
Interesting. Well, I mean, because I know that you can obviously program self-evolving patches. You can obviously hook up Max MSP to a modular and have it be spontaneous in its own way. But I like the physicality of it personally as a participant. Which is why some of my favorite synths are the simplest in terms of the interface, and that like they're just what you see is what you get. And I'm just really put off by menu diving a lot of the time.
But you prefer simpler synths. Is that for expression? But is that because you're sort of, it's more obvious to you, like,
Oh yeah, that's another thing, isn't it?
There's no confusion in terms of the design, so that you can be like, right, I know what I need to do to like make this change happen. Or
I don't think it's so much the complexity of it, more simplicity in terms of everything being physically under your fingertips, so that you can be spontaneous in real time and not have to pause and hit shift and go to a different menu. And do you know what I mean?
Because you could make if you were a designer, you could make the argument that if you give, if I gave Hazel more controls, she'd have more things to be spontaneous with. It's an interesting design choice where you say, well, actually, it's better that you make it simpler, because I will find it easier to navigate your instrument and be spontaneous. Do you know what I mean? It's like having at what point having options is actually counterintuitive.
Yeah, I think it is. Personally, I think the less options you have, the more creative you can be, because you can, it's like, well, you can learn those few options inside out, and then they become like in the way that a musician will play an instrument with their fingers. After a while, it's muscle memory. You end up playing it as an instrument in the same way. It's muscle memory. So like with a synth, with a lot of the Roland synths that I like. I think I like faders. I think that might be it. But they become under my fingers, like a kind of like their keys as well. Like the buttons and the knobs are part. Well, they're part of the instrument. So that I think the more of that you have going on, the less you can kind of refine what you're doing with them, maybe.
Yeah. Because it's that thing of having too granular control. It's, if you think about the difference between like a DX7 and a Juno 106, it's, you have two fundamentally different approaches where one has got, really only, I've got a Juno 60 in the room with me. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so 15, 20 controls maybe, if that.
Yeah.
Whereas a DX7 has 128. It's sort of like, and they're hidden behind a little 2-line LCD screen, and I must say, like, I'm completely with you in the sense that, like, for me personally, the Juno 60 is the best, my favorite synth for that, for exactly the reason you say. It's like I feel the same way, and that it's, it's immediate. I know exactly what I would need to do to make a certain thing happen. But conversely, I also really enjoy the DX7 because it's like, I think I did an interview and described it as like alchemy, because you have no idea what's going to come out.
Exactly.
Therefore, it's often surprising and gives you ideas.
Yeah, I think with something like that, with FM synthesis, like for me, I don't understand it. I don't really understand it, and I kind of don't want to. I don't want to understand it, because you play around with it and you do something you don't understand. And I understand the appeal in not understanding what you're doing. I've said that word too much. Understand. There's an appeal in that, you don't get what you're doing, but you can still be creative and spontaneous with it. So I think that's okay. It's more things like synths that. So I've got a Prophet 6 now, which for that very reason I absolutely love, because I feel like the minute I played one, I went over to a friend's house and had a go on one just to see if I wanted to pursue it, and I knew immediately, yes, I do, because it all makes sense to my hands. It was just an immediate response. But I, having used things like the Mofo, the Dave Smith Mofo, and things where there's a lot of menu diving going on, which obviously, it's quite nicely portable, so there's compromise there. But I find it a bit of a buzzkill when there's a bit too much of that going on. And it's like I'm kind of still trying to learn an instrument. I'm trying to play it as though I've mastered it, kind of thing. Maybe because I'm quite impatient. I don't know. I just like it to be intuitive and a physical experience, I think.
I think, just the important thing of knowing what, you know what you want. And it's like, there are things that I've certainly bought or tried that I did because other people used them, and I thought that I would, I think that's a very common thing, isn't it? When you consider any new toy or bit of equipment, because you're like, look, they're having a great time. Like, all these people are always like saying this thing's amazing. It's very, so like, I was thinking about the first synth I bought was a Novation Nova, which has got so much power. But for me, at the time when I had no idea how synth worked, it was absolutely overkill, and I didn't enjoy using it. And it was only when I traded it, I got one of those Korg MS-2000s, and it's such a simple device, as you say, like with the Prophet 6, where most of the controls are really all on the front panel, although on an MS-2000 has got wavetables, but that's what I needed, and it's what I would gravitate to. It's just what made sense. And for you, is presumably you're playing, so much of what you do is band based, and is live and requires a sort of a direct connection with an instrument. But you are obviously, you are producing music at home too.
Yeah, because like Well, I was going to say that the first thing I was going to say was that I learned synthesis on an SH-101.
Mm.
And that's it. You know, what you see is what you get. It's one oscillator. Everything's right there. It's really clear.
Yeah.
And it was, that was the best thing I could have been using at the time. So, but you were going to talk about writing. Producing.
Well, I've got a few sort of questions, particularly also what was your route into making music? Obviously, you were saying when you were younger, you were playing piano from a really early age. But at what point do you actually start making your own tunes and kind of taking that more seriously? When does it stop becoming like a pastime or something that you've always done? It's something that you actively choose to do.
Well, I think I started writing when I was about 10 or something. In that, I remember writing, like making up a little pop song that was just a cappella. And I remember recording it to my little tape machine upstairs in my bedroom one day, like secretly. I didn't want anyone to know I was doing it. I don't know if I ever played it to anyone, but
can you remember any of the lyrics and or content?
Yeah, all of it.
Oh dear.
You're not hearing it.
No, it's dying with you.
But but then as I grew up, I ended up quite often just sitting at the piano and making up stuff, improvising on the piano, not in a kind of jazz sense, but just writing on the spot. And I remember doing that a lot with my uncle. He would come round. He played the piano as well, or still does. He would come round and we'd kind of, it became like tradition or something. We'd just have a little, should we have sit at the piano together and just improvise a duet.
That's nice.
But I mean, in terms of like songwriting more seriously, I guess it happened gradually throughout my teens, and then to early 20s was becoming more of a, okay, this is going to be a thing. Because actually, when I was a teenager, I thought I wanted to be an actress. I didn't think that music was going to be my career. I just thought it was my life, but not my career, if that makes sense. Like, it was always part of my life. There was no question of that. I was very involved in a lot of theatre stuff. But then, gradually it started to become clear that it was all about music.
What do you think makes that? What made that change?
It was easy in that it not that it wasn't the easy choice, but that it made sense. It was like, if I didn't play or write for a long period of time, I felt almost unwell. Like I need it for my health, kind of thing, in a way.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? How do you describe it?
I think it's the way I express myself. Like, I'm not good with words. I've never been good with words. And I found growing up as a child, I found reading very difficult in terms of not the physical act of reading, but like having a desire to sit down and do it. And so I became not very expressive with words, but with sound in other ways. So maybe, I just love to, and I'm always singing around the house. I need it. It's like the same as breathing somehow.
So what did your early music sound like? I mean, it's listening to your music, it's sort of certainly like what I know is kind of, it feels like it's rooted in sort of 60s psychedelia and sort of.
I know what you've been listening to.
Yeah, that's what I've been listening to.
White Rabbit.
But that's not obviously, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think that definitely was very much so. At the time, I think everything I've put out so far is a kind of, it is a representation of not a phase, but maybe a phase I was going through at the time. And at that time I was listening to a lot of Jefferson Airplane, Tom Waits, Nick Cave, and other kind of like Silver Apples and United States of America and a bit, quite psychedelic stuff. But since then, nothing I've written has been like that. Because after that, it sort of became a kind of synthy post-punk thing, which was it. What came out of that record was it kind of became a band, because I had a live band for that record, and then we decided that we were sort of collaborating as a band rather than a solo artist. So we became a band and kind of morphed through the psychedelic kind of phase into kind of post-punk with John Carpenter thrown in.
Oh, rad.
And I think there's still some teeny elements of that in what I'm writing at the moment. When I was kind of developing as a writer early on, I was listening to a lot of Tori Amos, so I sounded like her at the time.
It's good to be constantly evolving, and you kind of have to, really, surely. And as you continue to be inspired and listen and discover things, it's just, I tend to find I binge a certain type of music quite, really solely and entirely, and then the music I make is just sort of soaked in that for a time.
Yeah, I think it's good to do that, but because I've definitely done that before. And when I was first introduced to American minimalism, everything I wrote had really kind of Reishi piano stuff going on. And like the record that I put out before that one was an EP actually, but that had some elements of that in it. I think that's kind of how you find a voice, isn't it? You try different things. You study an idea or a style. I didn't mean to make it sound all academic, actually, but
no, I'm totally on board.
You kind of do in the sense that you immerse yourself in it, and then it comes out of you. And then the more different things you do, I guess the more unique a sound you will end up with, in theory, hopefully.
Yeah, I've heard a sort of Aphex Twin quote where he says he wished he'd never heard any music at all, ever, so that the music he made would be truly, absolutely his own, sort of.
But how would you know that, though?
What, exactly.
Without having anything to reference.
It's the thing, it's, music is funny in that it's like it is a language. It's bizarre. It really like scrambles my brains, the concept that there is, that musical phrases can have a sentence structure and a resolution. I find that the fact that is a fact, and that if you play things in a certain way, they sound like a sentence has spoken and then has naturally come to its conclusion and finished. That is just bizarre to me. How a collection of frequencies has a grammar. I do not get how that works, and I assume it's universal as well. I don't know if. Yeah, as in, like, no matter where you are from in the world, no matter your background, you understand the grammar of music.
It is a universal language, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that sort of touches upon the whole question of, is there anything now that is going to be unique from now on, musically speaking? Is anything new going to happen?
Yeah. Truly new.
Truly new.
Yeah.
Or even pioneering, in a sense, because is there going to be a new genre? There probably will be, but I can't, for the life of me, think what it could be. I can't imagine what it could be.
You kind of think, like, at this point, we're so culturally saturated, that we live in, we've had 20 years of the internet, basically. And at this point, don't we know everything about everyone, about everything? And it's sort of, has it not all been said? It's.
Yeah, but maybe we'll be proven wrong, actually, and we just can't see it yet.
I guess, like, the standard line is that there's a kid with an iPhone that's making the music of the future.
Yeah.
Certainly there's some music that I've heard, like One Tricks Point Never, sort of doing these slightly strange kind of like 90s pastiches using sounds from things like the JV 1080 and kind of like rumplers of the 90s and sort of putting those into Ableton Live and turning them around in a washing machine, sort of that to me feels somewhat new, but then it's really a form of, I guess it is just a reworking of the sort of concepts of avant-garde music, but I don't know the music that well, so I can't talk.
Yeah. I guess it's all about context, really, isn't it? It's the context that makes it new, whatever it is. Like people are reusing the same ideas, but by putting them against things that they haven't been put against before, making it new.
Actually, it reminds me of the Kraftwerk thing, but the thinking of like all electronic music, well, not all electronic music, I should say, but like certain genres of electronic music really truly lead back to Kraftwerk, and you think about, but what's amazing about those genres is they were pioneered by Kraftwerk, but they weren't really invented by Kraftwerk. They were invented by, African-American people in Detroit and Chicago and New York listening to Kraftwerk and reinterpreting it. And there's an amazing, amazing, amazing photograph of a Kraftwerk gig where there's basically, Ralph Hutter, and he's like leaning forward with his calculator, and it's in 1981 in New York. He's sort of like leaning it, and there's the American audience, and there's like white people and black people together in the audience, and there's these sort of super stiff white Germans on stage. And he's handing the calculator, and there's an African-American woman who's playing the calculator, and you sort of just have this perfect image because it illustrates how, Kraftwerk could just sort of go, here's our idea, here's the music, and I pass it to you.
You have it.
Yeah, you have it. It's not their music anymore. It becomes another person's music, and they truly, genuinely create new styles of music, electro and techno, and these things are born from that, not from Kraftwerk alone, but from what other people did with Kraftwerk's music. And that's all there's that Jeremy Deller documentary that does a really good job of it. It talks about that image, and that I got a bit teary in the bit where he talks about that, because he's...
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's good. And it's about that, basically. Well, that's part of it. And Jeremy Deller says, whenever I'm feeling down about the world and about humanity, I go and look at that picture of that Kraftwerk gig, and I sort of think that the world and the way, that we are, that we're okay.
Everything is restored. Yeah.
Everything is pretty all right.
Nice.
Yeah. Tell me about the Will Gregory Moog ensemble, just because I think that's just a really interesting and amazing project, and I'd love to understand what it's like. Can you explain what it is to folks who don't know, and what is it? How does it work? How do you actually practice and play it?
Okay, so it's basically a chamber ensemble of mono analog synths. They're not all Moog, but it's the Moog ensemble stuff. But anyway, yeah. So basically, we play like a combination of like either traditional orchestral music or like orchestral soundtracks or pieces that people in the group have composed themselves using synths. So it's as though we're an orchestra. It's kind of orchestrated in that way, but we're playing synths. It's so much fun. It's amazing, because actually, if you ever hear it from an outsider's point of view, you wouldn't listen to it and think, oh, that's a bunch of synths. It just sounds like one big sound playing a piece of music that's really expressive, really dynamic. And that's one of the things that we work on in rehearsals quite a lot, actually, is the dynamics, the contrast in dynamics, and which we all do with the filter, with a low-pass filter. Opening the filter is how we get louder. Yeah. So that's what gives it a lot of kind of dynamic power, really. It's not just turning up the volume.
Yeah, it's sort of the low-pass gate concept that you're getting a real timbral change, but you're using a... Yeah, that's interesting.
Exactly, yeah.
It's the filter.
So the rehearsal process is often... it's quite hard to get, basically, because there's a lot of people involved. There's like 10 or 11 people. all playing analog synths, which can be interesting.
Tuning wise, I imagine.
Yeah, and so we do people think it's hilarious because in a performance we'll have to tune almost after every piece, maybe not quite that much, but and we're not doing it as a kind of gimmicky thing, but the audience might think, because they all kind of chuckle every time we're like meh, meh. But we have to, because they go out of tune so easily, and it's nice if they're slightly out. If they were all completely perfectly in, I don't think it would have the same magic. But obviously we have to be a bit on it and keeping them in tune, and also changing patches for most of them. Certainly the one that I use, I'd been using an SH09 with the Moog Ensemble.
Nice.
Which I love to bits. And, obviously between every piece, I can't hit a button to change the patch. I have to do it all from scratch every time. So under the pressure of being in a gig doing it, that can be fun.
Yeah.
But also maybe cool, because you don't necessarily get exactly the same sound every time if you're a bit rushed for one of them, for one of the transitions.
Absolutely. Do you have patch notes? How do you remember which get the set? Do you draw them on the synth, or presumably there's too many to like?
No, I don't draw them on. Do I? Oh, I might. The only thing I put on the synth is I mark the octave of the oscillator, because from the angle that I'm physically at, my eye, the kind of the indicator that shows what octave it's on, doesn't line up. Does that make sense? Yeah. So totally. I need to see it exactly in line, so I don't have to think about it. So I just put a little bit of tape on to line it up. But the way that I just write kind of notes in the top left hand corner of the score, draw a little picture of the sine wave of the waveform, whatever octave it's in. Really simple notes. Sometimes I might just take a photo of it, but that's kind of less practical, like a photo of the synth.
You're coming back to that thing. I mean, the SH09 is, it's all faders. It's that from the era of pre-Juno 106, but where it was very straightforward. So I guess if you thought, just change that, it's just pretty instant. And that idea that they're all slightly out of tune, like, it's really funny when you said that it sounds like a real orchestra. Like, when I was listening to, I've been sort of caning clips of it, and I was really entranced by it. And I actually wrote down, to me, at moments, it sounds like an orchestra for real. It doesn't sound like a synth anymore.
It's so true.
It really is. And it's, I guess, because there's so many sounds layered in. The one that really blew my mind was that Oceans of Heaven, Eddie Parker tune, which I actively encourage anyone listening to this to like go and seek out. But it's, to describe it, it's like swells. We're talking about, it's like the inverse of your Morton Feldman, and it's like slow sort of swells into existence like waves.
Yeah.
And it's presumably all of the musicians potentially, or maybe a handful of them playing at once. And so you've got this really long attack, this very slow swell, and it's just like these gorgeous, huge, enormous sounding chords. I wonder when you play live, do they spread the stereo of the instruments across? Is that sort of?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a guy called Tim Oliver who usually does the sound, and he's really good. I'm pretty sure he probably does do that. Yeah. But yeah, because what you were saying about it actually sounding like a real orchestra at times it really does, but it's not what we're trying to do. It's just it happens to do that because, like you said, there are so many different sounds, and I think deliberately so. We're not all the same timbre, so that there's a kind of rich sound.
But it is like, it's what Wendy Carlos was doing with one, monophonic System 55, I guess, is like with enough layers, it no longer sounds like just that really super basic funk anymore. It sounds, your mind can't hold on to all of the sounds at once, so it's forced to kind of listen to them as a whole.
Yeah.
But it's really I'd love to hear it live. I'm sad that I've not seen.
It's quite something because I wasn't able to do the last tour because I was on tour with Florence at the time. So, and when I came back, they had a show that I was able to go to.
Oh, nice.
So I got to see it as an audience member, and it really is. It's just an insane thing to watch. It's and to be part of as well, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like you were saying about the kind of rich tapestry of not just one primitive sound, but just to kind of go back on something we were talking about earlier about being able to see the inner workings. Actually, there's also something to be said for not seeing the inner workings and having magic happen just because you've got kind of such a combination of sounds that you can't really put your finger on what you're hearing. I'm quite into that.
That definitely is what happens in that band, clearly.
Yeah.
Because I can look at, and I'm looking at the pictures from above and I'm like, yeah, I know what every one of those synths is, blah, blah, blah. but when I listen to it, it's a whole. It's really amazing. And I love that you played the, I don't know if maybe you're not in this clip, but the Wendy Carlos Shining title music, which is, it's like really, that, the really like, sound as well that's been played. That's really well done. I just got
goosebumps. Yeah, just remembering all because we did a few Kubrick ones. We did The Shining and a bit from 2001: Space Odyssey and Clockwork Orange as well. But yeah, maybe some of the kind of more abstract, less traditionally classical bits are the most kind of haunting.
And it's quite difficult. I personally, I assume it is a technical nightmare. I mean, from the perspective of the virtuosity required to actually physically play those things accurately.
Well, yeah, in a way, yeah, partly because a lot of the pieces that we play were written for string instruments, and they jump around notes in a way that you don't necessarily do on the keyboard. If you're jumping from string to string, it's a different interval than going from note to note on the keyboard. In that sense, translating it onto a different instrument is quite a challenge, but also, especially because I played quite a small, the SH09 isn't the largest in terms of number of keys. So I would actually have to flip octaves quite a lot mid piece or even mid phrase. But yeah, I guess because of my classical background, I kind of already had some of the chops. It was just what was hard was translating that to an instrument that isn't velocity sensitive. Yeah. So you're putting all your expression into something and forgetting that it's not, if you're doing that with your fingers, it's not going to do anything. Well, some synths do, obviously, but most of the ones that we use for that aren't velocity sensitive. So all the expression is coming from my left hand, which is anchored to the cutoff knob. Fader, actually. I'm less into the kind of widdly, pitch bendy, synthy vibe, unless it's one massive pitch bend.
Yeah.
Or something,
like the bit from like the Vangelis Blade Runner titles, like
exactly.
CS80 ribbon. Have you played a CS80?
No. I've never met one in real life. I would love to.
A real one. Oh my goodness gracious. What you were saying about the ensemble being, what part of what makes it's sort of incredible in its quality is the fact that obviously not everyone is perfectly in tune is true. I think is all the more true of a CS80. It's the brief time that I played with one in a studio, it 1000% did not disappoint. It was
okay.
It was far better than I thought it was going to be, and it was probably also because it's slightly microtonal, to some degree, because it is not in tune. It creates a slightly kind of haunting quality. There is a sense of something that is
slightly from another world, and it's because it's not tuned exactly like something from this world, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, then it's very expressive, and depending on how you depress a key, every single key is going to respond in different ways. So you get, like crazy evocative. A part of its charm comes from its brokenness, I think.
That's it. Yeah, I think you're right. I would love to play one day.
Yeah.
If I know anyone who's listening who's got one.
Yeah. In Bristol.
Please invite me around when I'm allowed.
Not immediately.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet. So I was going to ask some sort of desert. Obviously, you talked about the Prophet, but sort of, do you have like a desert island instrument?
It's so hard because I think it would be the Juno 106, because that was always my favourite synth to go back to. This is out of the synths that I own anyway. And even since getting the Prophet 6, which I absolutely adore and love to bits, and I'm very, very happy that I have it with me during lockdown.
Yeah.
I still think there's some kind of emotional connection with the Juno. And I don't know if that's something to do with the fact that I have a bit of a history with Roland synths, and maybe there's a familiarity there, or what. Even though it's like it's much more limited in sonically and what you can do with it. So maybe it would drive me a bit insane after a while. I don't know. But
I think there's something, personally speaking, I'm taking a Juno 60 to my desert island. So that's what I have. But there's something just irresistible about the sound of those Rolands. There's a classiness to the sound as well, particularly. I think that was certainly true of like the ultimate, like the Jupiter 8, but the Junos have a sort of shade of that classiness where they've got a really elegant, polished sort of quality.
It's true. Having said that, I have had a go on a Jupiter, and I'm kind of lusting after one.
Yeah. The 8, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, I've got to say, for me personally, that is my dream synth, the Jupiter 8. But I have to say, and it's really sad, I've kind of given up on the dream. The dream is just because it can never, it's gone, that dream has gone into territories that no mortal can reach now. Thanks to
never know.
eBay.
Oh.
Yeah. I just think, I still hold out, we all hold out hope there's going to be some like day that we go to a sort of, bring and buy sale or answer sort of an ad in some future version of a classified for some old organ with sort of colourful buttons, and then you go and it's, that's my old so-and-so's organ there.
Oh.
You can have that if you like. Guess it's not worth much.
Yeah.
So it only made funny sounds. So I
I couldn't get it to work. It just goes, oh, what a shame. I'll have it.
Yeah, I'll take that off your hands. Yeah. It is a shame. I mean, in a sense, it's good that we are getting things remade again, and things that Roland choose not to remake are being remade again. So we may well get some methadone, relatively speaking. But yeah, the Jupiter is just a particularly classy synth.
Yeah. That would probably, if I had one, that would probably be, don't tell the 106. That would probably, that'd probably be the one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I think the one, I do just genuinely, well, I might nerd alert that the Juno, certainly the Juno 6, I don't know enough about the 106, but there are component similarities between those and Jupiter 8. Like I'm pretty sure they've got the same filter. They don't have the same envelopes, and they might have slightly different VCA. And there's obviously in the 106, then you've got those integrated chips, but there are literally some common components across some of the Junos and the Jupiters. So, but
possibly not the 106 though.
Possibly not the 106, but I think it has that same vibe. It was from the same family, and it had it was presumably the similar designers making it. There was only
4 years between them. I think they sound, I think they all sound great. There's like, as you were saying, like the 101 was your first kind of synth. That is,
Yeah.
I can think of no better first synth.
Wow. Yeah. Just, yeah.
That thing, especially, but you were playing it. You weren't like, I assume you're going to be playing it properly. You're not like playing with the arpeggiator and the sequencer and sort of, have you explored, and particularly with the modular stuff, have you gotten into that, or do you use it, you are like, it's an extension of your ability to play?
For sequencing, you mean?
Do you mess with it?
Yeah, because I've had a good old play with the Morphogene, with the Make Noise Morphogene, and I've that along with things like the Rene, the Make Noise, and very much have used the sequencer on the 101 and am a lot on the Prophet 6 as well. I'm not only about the physical, it must be something I have played.
Yeah.
It can be something that I have programmed, but that I'm manipulating in some way still. That's a good point, actually. I'm not against that at all. A lot of the stuff that I've written recently has arpeggiated bleeps and bloops in it.
Do you think you would write differently using arpeggiators if you didn't know how to play the keyboard properly? Do you know what I mean? In the sense, like I do wonder, like, do people, do drummers program patterns on an 808 differently to someone like myself who's not a drummer? Do you know what I mean? Like, does the practice inform it in that way?
Like, that's made me think of, so I've been having a bit of a go with a push with Ableton, and some of the things that you can do with the like melodic instruments, sampler instruments, where you can have the notes sort of set up on the pads in different intervals, so you play different shapes, and in no way correlates to anything I know about playing the keyboard. So it's really quite exciting, because I'm just going, okay, a shape here, a shape there. I've heard it's quite good for guitarists in that sense, because of it being set up, or if it's been being set up in fourths, for example. But so something like that I can write differently and not let my head get in the way too much, because it's a kind of going with feel in that sense. Is that if that's what you mean?
Yeah, it's like a way of breaking old patterns, basically, and thinking about just purely thinking about the sound, and not perhaps there are certain chords and like keys that your hands will naturally go to and fall to, especially when you're composing.
Yeah, but just to reverse engineer that, I actually find that if I'm programming drums, I really like to do it on a keyboard. It's really weird. Like, I've done it a lot on pads and it's great, but there's something, because the keyboard is such a familiar thing to me, and if I can hear a rhythm in my head, I can replicate it with expression on the keyboard, and it's not just something that I've drawn in.
That does make complete sense. It's like, that's the interface. There's obviously a huge portion of your brain that is like dedicated to making your hands move around on this particular interface, and so
well, it's like it is an extension of my finger in that sense. So there's no thinking about where I'm going. It's thinking about the musical aspect, not the. But yeah, in the reverse sense, I also like to put myself in an unfamiliar situation for that reason, so that I might come up with something that I wouldn't do normally. Like, when I was at university, I didn't have a keyboard with me for the first year. All I had was an acoustic guitar, so I had to write on guitar, and it wasn't my main instrument, so I was writing in a completely different way. Although I didn't end up using any of those songs, so maybe it was a bad idea.
You learned something.
Yeah.
There was yet another Aphex Twin quote. He was talking about the fact that I think he was talking about microtonal music, but he's talking about the fact that, he says, like, I love it when I can program a synth so that every key plays the wrong note.
Yeah.
And because that forces me to really, to rethink about how I think about music, basically.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know if you can do that on a Prophet, like detune, you know, or like incorrectly tune each note. I mean, I'm sure you can on things like the, you know, like the Rolly Seaboard and stuff. And certainly you can do that on pressure points like the module, because you have to freely tune each note.
Yeah, you can kind of do it on well, not every note, but on the Korg monopoly, each
Yes.
oscillator.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing, but, you know, it gives a certain vibe.
Yeah. By detuning each note, then it's like, oh.
But one way I have managed to do that unintentionally recently with a keyboard is because I love kind of concrete, and I love to sample and mangle things. And so if I kind of sample a note, just use something like Drum Rack in Ableton, sample different notes of whatever object, put them randomly in, but play it on a keyboard so that it completely doesn't correlate at all to the notes that I'm playing. So I'm not allowed to think about the notes that I'm playing because there's no point. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, that is exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, I need to try that.
Yeah, do it. I recommend it.
Now, I want to like pick your brains about. But it probably does relate to music in some way, because so much of this is to do with sound and you know, acoustic texture. But it's to talk about sci-fi and horror films.
Oh.
If we're going to this desert island, what are your sci-fi and horror films that you're taking?
Oh no, that's a horrible question.
I'm not just going to say one. So I mean, it can be. I guess it can be a highlight. You know, what is in your movie night?
There's got to be a John Carpenter film in there.
Do you approve of The Fog?
I very much approve.
Good.
Antonio Bay. Yeah. Let's say The Fog then.
That's good. That's good. And that's completely selfish of me, because I just want to watch The Fog. So that's my favourite John Carpenter. I don't know that many of his films. And like Halloween and...
Well, Halloween is a classic. Yeah.
See, I've never watched it. I'm really sorry.
It's okay. I'll forgive you.
I apologise. I'm doing my research.
The Thing is pretty...
Yes.
Is a thing.
Holy shit, I have watched. So the Thing and The Fog are the two I've watched the most. Can you describe The Thing to the audience for people who've not? How do you sum that film up?
There's lots of snow and really freaky looking monsters that are actually morphed, possessed version of people or animals that they've killed. This is getting a bit dark. I'm actually literally sitting in the dark as well.
Oh my God.
Because I haven't got up to turn the light on. And I think the thing that really puts you on edge about it is that it's that classic. Thing. It's the classic thing that God, stop saying the word. It's the classic thing that you know, it's the idea of, I guess, being possessed or something, and it could be anybody that you know could not be who you think they are, and it could be anyone in this room right now, kind of thing. And that's what puts you on edge for the whole movie. And
I think it certainly, and it keeps the stakes very high, because what is unique to The Thing, I would say, is how brutal it is when, you know, with what happens to the people. Like being possessed is not, in a lot of films, can mean that they become a bit...
That's not really it,
zombie-like, and like, oh, you know, Steve's possessed, and he's just like, oh. Whereas in The Thing, it means that Steve literally transmutes into this horrific... It's like the ultimate body horror, like nightmare fuel. Like they become, like his head rips off at one point, and then grows legs like a spider, and then scuttles around the floor, you know. And that's after his, like, the person was attempting to like administer, like, what they've got, those like shocky paddle things, and he's about to push the shocky paddles down on the guy's chest, and suddenly the entire guy's chest opens up like a mouth and eats the guy's hands, and his hands rip off, and then his head comes off and turns into a spider. And it's just like, and there's a pustulous sort of tangible wet quality to all of the... It's really awful. It truly is, like, I would say The Thing is unique in the sense that even now, and even knowing that they're like, oh, it's all cheesy, sort of, it's all just like bits of rubber, but it is truly shocking.
Yeah,
still.
It is. I think it's the combination of that. It's the shock and the suspense.
What is the music in the thing? I can't think of the...
So the music, although it sounds...
Is it Morricone?
Yeah, it is. So but it's in the style of John Carpenter, isn't it? Essentially. Weird. It's great.
Oh, it has the bow. Like probably the best two bow. The two,
or like
or the
right
best
at the
one
end,
note.
There's one moment that I can picture with the bow. It sounds like, I don't know what it is. Maybe an Oberheim or something.
I think it must be. That's the sort of Carpenter's classic synth.
Yeah.
There's a bit at the very end where they're just sat there quietly, and then just you get the bow, and it's like, it's pretty righteous. It's like, it's kind of the sound from I don't know, like almost it feels appropriate to be like a cop film or some sort of like, but in this context, it's just doom laden.
It is.
I can't remember any of the notes other than that one, but then I suppose that's true of like the Jaws soundtrack as well.
Actually. I can remember that a lot of his soundtracks are memorable. Like, have you seen Assault on Precinct 13? That's and then there's Escape from New York, which we played in the Moog Ensemble, actually.
Amazing.
The soundtrack for. And I got the job of doing the beep, 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 which I absolutely loved. Well, not just that, but
quite hard to just play like a constant like beep 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 beep. I find that really difficult.
I did play it. I was going to say it was clocked, but it wasn't. It was played. I think because what wasn't played was there's like a noise hat type thing, like a kind of thing. That's being clocked, but maybe I think everything else is played in real time. Anyway, yeah, sci-fi and stuff. Sci-fi movies, that's quite hard. Well, actually, no, going back to horror, it might sound like a bit of a cliche, but I will always go back to Psycho. I'm a huge fan of Hitchcock. Maybe not just Psycho, maybe some of the other ones as well, like The Birds. And I don't know if you've seen Rope by Hitchcock. It's a lesser known one, but it's amazing. I would highly recommend it.
Is Rope the one?
But that's more suspense
with
than horror.
The box?
Yeah.
Yes, I have seen
There's
Rope.
Something in the box. Well, it's not actually I'm not giving anything away by saying it, because they reveal it at the beginning. There's a body in the box. And they have a party and invite everyone round and use the box as a table, as a dining table. But the whole thing is filmed... with the exception of running out of tape and having to change tape, it's all done as one long shot. And every time they would run out of tape or about to run out of tape, they would zoom into something. Yeah. I can't remember if each time it was somebody's back or maybe just one of the times they'd zoom into someone's back and then zoom out again and it'd be a new tape.
So you use like careful little like covers and then so it feels like it's one shot.
Yeah.
Even though it technically isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I would highly recommend.
I actually have watched it. I've forgotten it. That I need to rewatch. Yeah, it's just that sort of so well constructed and tight, and like every single thing in those films is in there for a reason. It's that sort of concept of nothing is fluff.
Yeah,
everything is carefully like thought through and tight, and
yeah. And he even made a point of saying, I think probably that everything. There shouldn't be one thing in shot that is not there for a reason, that isn't serving a purpose.
Yeah.
And you could think that way musically as well, if you wanted to sort of think about if you're writing, producing, and what elements you're. Because I find it's one of the things I find really hard is knowing what to let go of and knowing what not to let go of. If you've thrown a load of ideas down, what has a purpose there and what doesn't. Kind of thing.
How much can you take away and have it still work?
Yeah.
So, what is the future of music technology?
Oh my.
Hazel Mills.
Oh, I don't. Do you know what? this whole situation that's happening now is making me feel slightly apprehensive, slightly anxious about the future of, or maybe there's opportunities, but it's sort of feeling a bit like more is going to happen in the virtual sense. There's going to be a lot more remote collaborating, and a lot more in the box kind of thing. I worry that well, no, maybe I don't worry. Do you know what? I don't know.
Well,
I'll have to think about that one.
Definitely.
Yeah, go on.
Go on.
No, you go.
I was going to say, we definitely do need better ways. I've been playing around with that. Tim Exile's Endless app is very good as a way of, highly recommend playing with that as a way of like remotely asynchronously making music together. It's kind of like the musical equivalent of that game where you have a piece of A4 paper and someone draws a head and folds it over, and the next person does the shoulders and so on. And
what's the name of the app?
So it's called Endless, but with 3 S's. Endless.
Tim Exile.
Tim Exile. And it's like a sort of, the kind of layout is like a bit like a push in the sense that you've got some sounds and you've got a grid. But the concept of it is that you bake audio at every turn. So whenever you make a change, you hit a commit button and it bakes the audio into a new sort of scene. What would be a kind of, is it scenes in Ableton? The horizontal sort of line.
Yeah.
It kind of creates a new version of those. And it's very forward in that sense. And it's, i.e. that the music you make on it, you're always thinking about what to do next, not what you've done in the past. I find it really unique in that way.
That is good.
It's a good way of collaborating. And it's also, you can plug other instruments into it. Like, if you've got an audio interface that goes into your phone or an iPad and there is a desktop app. Yeah, it really is quite interesting.
I would like to play Musical Consequences more. I'm quite excited by that. I said I was worried about there being more remote collaboration, but I think what I mean is as long as it doesn't mean that there's less meaningful interaction going on as a result, but probably won't be, while we can't have physical interactions, this is a really great, I think it's actually, there are many good reasons for the fact that this is happening now in our lifetime, at this time where we're kind of mostly equipped to deal with continuing certain things, without having to leave the house. And I've been wanting to do more remote collaboration actually. So that sounds quite fun. And the idea that you're kind of looking forward rather than looking back, that sort of reminds me of a book that I was like obsessed with for a bit actually. It's called the Songwriters, what's it called? Frustrated Songwriters Handbook. And it's just like some really amazing techniques and tips for if you feel like you've got writer's block, or even if you don't. And the idea is that you're not agonizing for long periods of time over one idea, but you just keep moving forward and you keep exercising the muscle, and you just, yeah. So that sounds good. I've written that down, that app. I'm going to check it out.
Amazing.
Cool.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
You are welcome. Yeah, it's been fun.
And stop. Oh, yeah, there you go. Hazel Mills. Thank you, Hazel, for giving your time. What an awesome chat. I love that. That was just a perfect ramble through a whole manner of different things, loads of interesting things to sort of look up and learn more on. Pierre Bastien, remember mentioning the sort of like musical contraptions. And of course, as I said, I've linked to some of the performances with the Gregory Moog Ensemble, and particularly that Eddie Parker piece. It is linked down below. So again, thank you, Hazel, for being awesome and letting me chat to you, and thank you for chatting. Loved it.
I will invite you to please consider the links down below. There is the Black Lives Matter card that I mentioned that has organisations that you can support. If you would like to lend your support for the movement that is going on, please consider doing so. Please consider also putting some money towards afrorack.org's organisation. They are doing very, very cool things in Chicago. And thank you to our sponsors. They are Signal Sounds, the beautiful Signal Sounds in Glasgow. Buy things from them at signalsounds.com. And also thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this episode. There is that link down below if you would like to explore your creativity and learn yourself some new skills so that you can make some new stuff. Please check that out. There is the premium subscription. Go give it a click. Get yourself 2 months of free learning. That's all. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.